What's up, Packer fans? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thank you so much for joining me today. Always appreciate it. This is supposed to be the dead portion of the Packers schedule and offseason and everything like that, where we don't have a ton to talk about and we have to, maybe find some creative topics to talk about. That's not the case today because we had some pretty surprising news on Friday as the Packers released quarterback Kurt Benkert from the roster, subjective to waivers, of course, and seemingly that came out of complete nowhere. And I certainly did not expect that to happen. I don't think anyone really did. He was clearly the number 3 quarterback in OTAs and minicamps ahead of Danny Etling. So, had you told me that a third string player was released on Friday, I would have probably been like, yeah, they probably just didn't see something from someone in minicamps and OTAs, and that makes sense. Maybe just go in a different direction. If you would have told me that a quarterback was released on Friday, I'd have been like, yeah, they probably just moved on from Danny Etling. There really wasn't much there to kind of build off of. But no, it was Kurt Benkert. And Kurt Benkert might be the only third stringer in the history of the Packers that we are dedicating an entire episode to when he gets released. Somebody who's played a total of 2 snaps for the Packers, both kneel downs, and we are dedicating a full episode to him today because he was released. And the reason that is because few, if any, players in the history of the Green Bay Packers have become such a fan favorite and so endearing to the Packers fan base in such a short period of time as Kurt Benkert. I don't care if they were a Hall of Famer. I don't care if they were a starter, a backup, a whatever. Kurt Benkert quickly moved himself into cult hero status very, very quickly by doing a variety of different things, like just being an awesome person who can, continue to interact with the fans, put together some really interesting videos, breaking down Madden and how things actually, reflect in real life in that regards. He went to a barbecue with Paul Brettel and Paul Brettel's family. He did the wide receiver video with Tom Grassi, which was phenomenal. Like, he just made himself so endearing to Packer fans. He carried the G from day one, and he just became this Packers cult hero. And that's why this was semi-surprising, because Green Bay generally likes these type of players and locker room presences, etc. And B, it just came as a little bit of a surprise, right? And again, most third stringers or lower tier players we're not talking about in this capacity. This was major news. You check Packers Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, like there was a ton of buzz surrounding the release of Kurt Benkert. A lot of people very upset, disappointed, frustrated, sad, etc. because Kurt Benkert's time with Green Bay has come to an end. And when this first happened, my initial reaction was, I wonder if Kurt Benkert asked to be released, because that would have made some sense, right? Because if he feels like he got better this offseason and he looks at the depth chart and says, all right, guys, like Aaron's going to be the 1, you're not doing anything with Jordan, he's going to be the 2, and you're not keeping 3 quarterbacks. Like, there's just other opportunities out there that I could go to that would make a lot more sense. That was my initial read on it. But then when you read Kurt's tweet, so the first tweet he put was, life, man. I appreciate everything that came with being a Packer. Equally as excited to see what's next. Can't wait to get to work. And then he said, I'm grateful that this was one of the stops along the way. Green Bay will always be a special place to us. For Scout, it was where she learned to walk. And this is his daughter. Spoke her first words and met her first friends. I'll miss the real life part of it more than anything. Thank you, guys. So just based on his tweets, it did not feel like this was something that he was requesting and he was expecting. This felt like it probably came out of nowhere to him just as much as it came out of nowhere to us. And again, I just want to say it one more time. Kurt carried the G from day one in Green Bay. He acclimated himself to the Packers, the city of Green Bay, and Packer fans. There just weren't many people like him. And again, really elevated himself to cult hero status in his short period of time as a member of the Green Bay Packers. Unfortunately, or I don't know, maybe fortunately, depending on how you're looking at it, roster decisions are not based on off the field carrying the G and just that, right? These are on-field decisions based on what Green Bay sees in practice, based on how they think they can put the best roster together, and that's ultimately what Brian Gutekunst has to make decisions on. And those are not easy decisions. And I'm sure this was something that was discussed with Matt LaFleur and Tom Clements and Adam Stenavich and the entire offensive coaching staff. And, I'm sure Brian Gutekunst and the front office, I'm sure everyone was involved in that decision. And those are never easy decisions. Fan favorite players, whether they are Hall of Fame quarterback starters or third stringers, are never easy to release. And when you have somebody that is doing those type of things to carry the G and be that presence and be a good locker room guy, it makes it that much harder. I'm sure this was not an easy release for the Packers and their front office and their coaching staff, etc. But it doesn't mean that it's the wrong decision, and it doesn't necessarily mean that, Brian Gutekunst and the Packers front office deserves a bunch of, hate or frustration for making this move. If anything, at times I almost feel, not proud's the wrong word, but I feel like it makes it that much more that they're trying to do the right thing, because these aren't easy decisions. The easy thing would just be to string him along until the end of training camp when he was probably going to get released anyway. The fact that they had the belief that this was the time to move on, and they did it, even though he was a fan favorite, believes that they're convicted in their beliefs that they're going to do the best thing they can to make the best 90-man roster, whether that's popular with fans or not. In this case, it's not. But they're going to do that anyway because they think it's what's best for the, green and gold and at 1265, the Packers franchise, etc. So the question then becomes, why was Kurt Benkert released? What went into this decision, and was it the right decision? So this is difficult to break down in some capacity because I'm not trying to be disparaging to Kurt Benkert here. I was cheering for him. I will continue to cheer for him. I hope he goes on to have a successful NFL career. He's been nothing but fantastic in his time in Green Bay. So this is not meant to tear down or rip down Kurt Benkert. But this is always going to be a realistic show, and I'm going to tell you, the things that I feel like I know and analyze and things like that, right? So the first thing that needs to be said here, and it shouldn't need to be said, but it does need to be said, is that Kurt Benkert is not better than and was not competing with Jordan Love. Jordan Love is the better quarterback. He is the more talented quarterback. If you need to go out and Aaron Rodgers misses 4 games and your choice is to play Jordan Love or Kurt Benkert, there is not a coach or GM in the entire league that is taking Kurt Benkert over Jordan Love right now. And that's just, he's the backup. He is the number 2. Part of that is draft status, but part of that is just pure, raw, unmitigated talent. There's a certain level of upside that Kurt Benkert just doesn't have, and there is for Jordan Love. There's a stratosphere that Jordan Love can reach that Kurt Benkert never had. Now, you can make the argument that being a backup quarterback isn't about potential. It's about trying to basically go 2-2 in those 4 games that your starting quarterback misses, right? I still believe that unquestionably, Jordan Love gives you the better chance to do that because he just has a better skill set and there's more things that you can ask him to do that you just can't ask Kurt Benkert to do. So in no way, shape, or form was this an open competition between Kurt Benkert and Jordan Love. That was Jordan Love's job. Aaron Rodgers was the 1 and is the 1. Jordan Love was the 2 and is the 2. And Kurt Benkert was fighting for maybe at best a number 3 spot with the Packers that was probably never going to come to fruition because this isn't a roster that's set up to keep 3 quarterbacks. More likely he was really going to go on display for 31 other teams to say, hey, look what I can do. I can help your team. Or try to earn a practice squad spot like he did in previous seasons with the Packers. So this was never a competition between Jordan Love and Kurt Benkert. It just is what it is, and that's the right call. That is 1,000,000% the right call. Jordan Love is just the better quarterback, period. As sort of mentioned here, there's just a limited ceiling and limited upside for Kurt Benkert. At best, he probably becomes a okay number 2 quarterback. In likelihood, he's probably a lower tier number 2 or a high tier number 3 at best. And right now, he's probably in that 3rd tier category. Now, that's not again to say anything bad about Kurt Benkert. Number 3 quarterbacks have value in this league. If you're a solid number 3 quarterback, you're going to end up on a practice squad or the back of a roster, and you're going to continue to work at your craft. So that's not to tear him down. He's a potential 53-man roster player for some team. It just probably wasn't in Green Bay. And at some time, if you're looking at all right, who are the best 53 players that we can keep on this roster and what levels they can ultimately achieve, again, your best case scenario with Kurt is probably a middle tier number 2 backup quarterback. And he's just not there yet. And clearly Green Bay felt the same way, which is why they moved on from him at this time. And I know a lot of people think fondly of what he did in Green Bay. which is true. Like I was a fan as well, but you go back and look at his preseason. Preseason stats don't mean a whole heck of a lot. He was 33 of 48, really good completion percentage, but only 300 yards on 48 attempts, which is really low yards per attempt. 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. So while that doesn't mean a lot, and that's again not meant to rip down Kurt Benkert, you backup offensive linemen, backup wide receivers, etc. It's not like Kirk went out and threw 9 touchdowns, no picks, and looked phenomenal, right? He looked like a number 3 quarterback, which again is really impressive. You're a top 100 thrower of the football in the entire world if you're a number 3 quarterback. Literal top 100 thrower of the football in the world if you're a top 100 NFL quarterback, if you're a third string quarterback. So that's not meant to tear him down, it's just to say there's a very limited upside for what he has. Now, the big question, which I'm going to get to more in just a moment, is, yeah, but Andy, isn't he better than Danny Etling? I think the answer is yes. And that's one of the things that's confusing to me, but I'm going to go into that in much greater detail in just a second. The other questions that need to be asked, is he a 53-man roster player? If Green Bay saw him in mini camps and OTAs and just thought, listen, there's no way he's going to make the 53, then maybe you release him now and give him the opportunity to sign with another team prior to training camp and catch on somewhere. Because if you know that release is going to happen at some point, then you probably move on. Because otherwise what could happen is you let him play in the preseason and you let him play in training, get all the snaps in training camp, and he's taking snaps away from a player who might end up on your practice squad, whereas you know that Kirk probably is going to end up on some other team, even if he plays really well. So I can understand that because, again, he probably wasn't making the 53 here in Green Bay. And then the next question is, well, what happens if Jordan Love or Aaron Rodgers get hurt? Don't you want a guy like Kurt Benkert around that knows the offense? Okay, I think that is probably a fair question, but this is what I would say. If Aaron Rodgers gets hurt, I don't think Green Bay is going Jordan Love 1, Kurt Benkert 2. Thinking back to yesterday when Benkert was still on the roster. In my opinion, they're going out and they're calling Jimmy G, the 49ers for Jimmy G. They're calling the Browns for Baker Mayfield. They're going to call around to try to find a competitive quarterback that can come in and potentially win some games right now. If Jordan Love goes down, same thing. Now, not probably Jimmy G, not probably Baker Mayfield, but probably a quarterback that can be a legitimate backup quarterback and win some games should Aaron Rodgers go down after that at some period of time. So in neither of those situations do I think Kurt Benkert was the answer, even in those situations. And the other thing that I will say here is what probably happens with Kurt Benkert. I'm not sure he actually gets claimed. Again, I hope he does, but I'm not sure he does. But even if he does, the likely end spot for Kurt Benkert is probably on a team's practice squad this season. And if that's the case, for Green Bay, there's no downside in trying to see, maybe bring in a different quarterback or see what you have in Danny Etling. Because if Benkert ends up on somebody else's practice squad, if something does happen to your quarterbacks where you actually need a Kurt Benkert, you can sign him at any time. I don't think he's likely to make a 53. We'll see if he does. Could be wrong. But I think he probably ends up on some team's practice squad, which means you have access to him at any time and can just bring him on your active roster if you need to anyway. So I don't think there's actually a ton of downside here either. And then the last question they would need to answer is, does he have the upside to become an eventual starting quarterback? And I just don't think the answer is yes. I don't think there's a scenario where Kurt Benkert is a starting NFL quarterback. And even if he was, it was probably in a backup situation because somebody got hurt and he was a very, very, very bottom tier NFL starter. So when you have limited upside, you don't have the upside to become an NFL starter. If things happen to Rodgers or Love, you're probably going in a different direction anyway. You can probably sign him off of some team's practice squad at any time that you want in the middle of a season. There's just very limited downside in releasing Kurt Benkert at this time. And in the meantime, if they want to go out and grab a different quarterback or just see more of Danny Etling, you have the ability to do that in the meantime and maybe see, if they have the ability to have a better upside or to become a starter down the road. Once you realize that somebody doesn't have that upside to become a starter, their value just diminishes and you start probably looking in a different direction. And it seems like that's what Green Bay did in this situation. So that brings us to the question of what's an ideal number 3 quarterback? And what does that normal tier look like? Number 1, number 2, number 3. In an ideal world, your number 1 is a MVP caliber quarterback, which Green Bay has set in Aaron Rodgers. Your number 2 is usually somebody, again, that you can go 2-2 with in a 4-game stretch. If you lose your number 1 guy for any significant period of time, you're probably screwed anyway. The question is, if you miss 4 games, 6 games, can you go about 500 in that time where that main quarterback is away? Now, the answer to that is Jordan Love. You don't know. We don't know if he can go 2-2, 3-3 in a 4 or 6 game absence for Aaron Rodgers. There's few backup quarterbacks who can, but that's the ideal situation, right? And then the number 3 is ideally, if you have a number 3, is a developmental quarterback that's sitting on, the back of the bench, that's learning and developing and trying to get better, right? For Green Bay, we know that Jordan's going to be the 2 because of his draft status and because of his talent, right? So that you have the 1, he's going to be the 2, and your developmental quarterback is still Jordan Love. So Jordan Love, in this case, is basically in like the perfect 3-tier scenario, is your number 2 and your number 3. You could argue that maybe you'd like to have a veteran in there, but again, nobody's beating out Jordan Love for the number 2 based on his draft slot anyway, so it's a moot point. And this is where I would make an argument, actually, that I actually really like Kurt Benkert as a number 3 quarterback who's a bit of a gamer, who knows the offense really well. Yes, you probably look elsewhere, to get a quarterback, but we've seen scenarios where all of a sudden, your top 2 quarterbacks go down in like a, 1 week period of time, and now your number 3 is starting, and you don't have the ability to go call around teams and call elsewhere. Or it could happen after the trade deadline too. And having a guy like Kurt that knows the offense and is a bit of a gamer and can just be on your practice squad, that's not the worst case scenario in the world. So that is one of the things that I'm curious about, because I actually think he, in this scenario, with Love being sort of the 2-3 and your developmental guy, what more can you ask out of a number 3 than a guy who's been in the league a while, knows the offense, is putting all the time, effort, and energy in, is a great locker room guy? So that's the question mark. You ideally, or I guess arguably, what they're doing is going with somebody with more upside, and that's what they're going to have to live with, and we'll see. But that's the one thing that I would go to, is I really think that Green Bay, that there's value in Kurt Benkert as a number 3 quarterback based on what he knows of the offense and based on who he is as a player and just a locker room guy. Then the next question is, why now? Well, you have the end of mini camps and OTAs, and Green Bay clearly got a look at Benkert and just said, we know what he is, we know what he's not, and we're going to try something different at this point. And I can understand that. They clearly didn't feel like he was the answer at quarterback, even as a number 3. And this ultimately gives Kirk the best opportunity to find a new team and get with another team for training camp and try to earn a 53-man roster spot with another team when that spot was not likely coming in Green Bay. I'm not saying that they just did this for Kurt's benefit, but I think you can make a strong argument that doing it now is much better for Kurt than at some point during training camp, etc. Right? So maybe they are doing him a slight favor by doing it now, but either way, this is probably a decent timing for Kurt, even though there's never a great time to get basically fired from your job. So what does this mean for the Packers, and what's next? First question is, will they add a quarterback? My gut says yes, because I don't think Danny Ettling's a true number 3. I think he's more of like a camp arm. You could argue no, because Jordan Love just needs so many reps in training camp anyway that Rodgers is going to get all the starter reps, and you're probably giving every other rep to Jordan Love anyway, and then you can give a handful to Danny Etling here and there. So you may not need that other guy, but I would still lean that maybe Green Bay brings in somebody just for, the family nights in the preseason. Rodgers isn't going to play. So, if all of a sudden one of your other quarterbacks is down for a game or something, now you only have one quarterback who's going to play. So I would think they add somebody. But once again, Jordan Love needs a ton of reps, and even in preseason, is probably going to play arguably every snap, at least probably first 3 quarters of the 3 games, right? And then maybe Etling or whoever else is on the roster gets a handful of snaps, but Jordan Love is going to get the vast majority of practice reps as well as exhibition game snaps. So maybe they don't need a 4, but it'll be interesting to see if they do add somebody, and I think it's possible. If they do go in that direction, Josh Rosen could be somebody. He has that connection with Aaron Rodgers. James Morgan, former Green Bay area native, could be an answer there. Anthony Gordon was somebody I really liked as an undrafted guy coming out of college. Those could be some younger options. If they wanted to go more the veteran route, Garrett Gilbert could be an option. AJ McCarron, Mike Glennon. Not saying any of those are great options, but those could be some names to keep an eye on. And then I think the next thing I want to go over just really quick here is the Danny Etling versus Kurt Benkert scenario. This is the weird part to me. I just don't think that you could view OTAs and minicamps, and clearly Green Bay did, but it was very weird to me. Like, Etling didn't show much of anything to me in OTAs or minicamps. It was clear that Kurt Benkert was to me, the better quarterback. What do I know? The Packers certainly know more, so lean on that side. But it was just weird that it seemed like Kurt Benkert was clearly the number 3 based on reps and how they got in practice and things like that. And there was nothing that Danny Etling did that you could point to and be like, all right, that's why he beat him out. Now, not every practice was open to the media, right? So maybe in the non-media sessions, Etling was tearing it up and Kurt struggled. That's within the realm of possibility. But the odd thing here is Etling's actually older than Benkert. So it's not like Etling's like 3 years younger and this, big time developmental quarterback. Etling's actually older. He doesn't know the offense like Kurt knows the offense. And as mentioned, you'd be hard pressed to say that Etling was actually better than Kurt Benkert in minicamps or OTAs. So that's the one to me that, listen, if you want to bring in a different quarterback, I get it. But again, I'm hard pressed to say that, keeping Etling over Benkert at this point was the smart way to go. So we'll see. There's definitely some upside with Etling. He's a very athletic player. At one point, I forget it was the Patriots. I think it was the Patriots, but there were teams that were looking at him as a wide receiver, like a legitimate NFL wide receiver. So he's a very interesting player, and he clearly is going to get a shot at the number 3 and probable practice squad spot for this Packers team. I did see some questions out there about practice squad eligibility. Yes, Kurt Benkert would have been eligible for the practice squad. You can keep up to 6 players on your roster. It doesn't matter if they are rookies or 30-year veterans or anything in between. You can keep up to 6 guys with any level of eligibility. So he would have been eligible for the Packers practice squad once again. And that brings us to the question of what's next for Kurt Benkert. Will he be claimed? I'm not sure. I think it's possible. I wouldn't guarantee it, but we'll have to wait and see if he gets claimed. I think in likelihood he doesn't, and then some team signs him on a new deal, but we'll have to wait and see. Chicago and Denver could be teams that make sense, right? Luke Getsy with Chicago. And of course, just every former Packer goes in the NFC North. So that would definitely be a level of heartbreaking to see him in a Bears jersey, but within the realm of possibility, Denver as well, going with Nathaniel Hackett. The Broncos backups right now are Brett Rippon and Josh Johnson. So they could easily use another guy to compete there. The Bears, Nathan Peterman and Trevor Siemian, which you know who those guys are as well. So both of those spots could be decent landing spots. Again, not wishing the Bears connection into fruition, but with, again, Getsy and Hackett in those 2 spots could make some sense. I'll end by saying this. Kurt's going to be missed in Green Bay. I'm very surprised that they kept Danny Etling at this point over him. And while it's generated a ton of buzz, and I think it's a bummer, I think this move was always going to happen, and I ultimately don't think that this affects much of the Packers' 2022 season and what happens from here on out. He was an amazing story in Green Bay. I think we all are wishing him the best of luck, and we'll continue to monitor his career, and I think we'll always remember, his time, and the impact that he made in the community and with the Packers fans in such a short period of time. But Green Bay decided it was time to move on. And we'll just have to see what if they add another quarterback, what decisions they make in that regards from here on out, and or just what Danny Etling can bring to the table. So we'll have to kind of wait and see. But this is the most shocking move that could have happened, but it definitely came out of nowhere and definitely caught a lot of people by surprise. Here's wishing Kurt the best of luck, and hopefully he lands on his feet and is successful in whatever his next endeavor is. Thanks so much for joining me today. Always appreciate it. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.